Welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at a career in American entertainment that is, well, it's frankly unprecedented. We're talking about the life and work of Carl Reiner.
It's just an incredible scope. I mean, we're looking at a professional life that spanned 7 full decades.
7 decades. It's almost hard to comprehend. From his start in 1945, right after the war, all the way up to his passing in 2020.
And this is someone who didn't just, participate in comedy. He actively defined multiple eras of it.
Right. He moved so seamlessly from those early, really kinetic days of live television into modern Hollywood film and then even into the world of social media.
That 7-decade span is it's astounding. And the sheer number of roles he mastered, it almost makes it hard to categorize him.
Absolutely. An 11-time Emmy winner, a celebrated author,
Over 2 dozen books.
a Grammy winner, an iconic film director. But just listing those titles, it doesn't really do the human story justice, does it?
Not at all. It kind of diminishes the evolution of his talent. So today we're conducting an in-depth examination of the source material, mainly his extensive biography and his own personal accounts, to trace that evolution.
And really to understand the core insights that explain his profound and really long-lasting influence on American humor.
Yes.
Our mission here is to synthesize this massive career into the most compelling and relevant parts for you. We're going to explore the very surprising origins of the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Which is probably his most enduring television legacy.
For sure. We'll also get into that legendary and I think essential partnership with Mel Brooks. And then we'll analyze his successful transition into directing, especially his key role in launching the film careers of, comedic giants like Steve Martin.
And finally, we have to look at his later life. It was so incredibly prolific, both as an author and, fascinatingly, as this constant outspoken presence on social media right up until his final days.
It's a study in creative versatility, yes, but it seems to be more than that. It's about recognizing and harnessing opportunity.
Even when that opportunity comes through, sheer accident or even military necessity. And to do that, we have to start at the beginning. We need to understand where this unparalleled career came from. The working class streets of the Bronx.
Okay, let's unpack this incredible journey. And let's start with the very humble beginnings of Carl Reiner. He was born in the Bronx, New York on March 20th, 1922.
His parents were Jewish immigrants. His father, Irving, was a watchmaker from Austria, and his mother, Bessie, was from Romania.
So a classic blue-collar immigrant background, a detail that becomes really relevant later on when we discuss his core comedic philosophy.
The need to write for the common person.
Exactly.
And that background absolutely sets the stage for his whole perspective. If you look at his teenage years, the source material notes that by the time he was 16, he was working a very practical, very mechanical job.
Right, he was a machinist, repairing sewing machines.
Yes. So he wasn't immediately on a path to the stages of Broadway or the sound stages of Hollywood. Not at all. He was on a completely different track, one focused on, manual skill and engineering.
And this is where we see that first major pivot point. And it was orchestrated by his family. The crucial intervention came from his older brother, Charles, who was serving in the 9th Infantry Division in World War II. And Charles told Carl about a free drama workshop that was being offered.
And this workshop was sponsored by the Works Progress Administration, the WPA.
It's really important to pause and appreciate the historical significance of the WPA here.
Absolutely.
Right.
For anyone who might not be familiar, the Works Progress Administration was one of the key agencies of Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal. It was designed to put millions of unemployed people to work during the Great Depression.
And most people associate it with, building roads or painting murals.
Right. But it also had Federal Project Number 1, which employed artists, musicians, writers, and actors, and this free drama workshop. It was a direct result of that Depression-era government aid. That was the catalyst.
Exactly. Carl Reiner later credited his brother Charles with influencing his decision to change careers entirely, to move away from fixing machines and toward the performing arts.
Which the WPA made accessible to him. It's a remarkable piece of history, really. It shows how a federal program designed for economic recovery indirectly launched one of the most defining comedy careers in history.
But the next stage of his life, his mandatory military service, is his ability to pivot and adapt under pressure really comes into focus.
It becomes clear that the military, which is often seen as this homogenizing force, it inadvertently acted as his primary training ground for both directing and performing.
This is where his career path gets genuinely fascinating, because his entry into the military was just full of these unexpected, almost novelistic turns. Reiner was drafted into the U.S. Army Air Forces in October 1942. His initial training path was slated for radio operator.
Another technical, sort of behind-the-scenes role.
Exactly. However, fortune, or maybe just illness, intervened. He ended up spending 3 months in the hospital recovering from pneumonia.
And once he recovered, the Army didn't send him back to radio training. The needs had shifted.
Right. Instead, he was sent to Georgetown University for 10 months to train as a French interpreter.
That is a massive, sudden pivot. I mean, from the technical world of military radio operation to the academic and cultural world of European language study.
And this language training led directly to his very first directorial experience. This is a really revealing detail about his intrinsic capabilities.
What did he do?
During his language training at Georgetown, he directed a Molière play, and it was performed entirely in French.
Wow, imagine that. His first official foray into directing is so far removed from the sharp, quick-witted sketch comedy he'd become famous for.
Classical French theater during the height of a global war.
It speaks volumes about his fundamental ability to just command a creative project, regardless of the language or the genre. The source material shows us that Reiner was a natural leader and organizer in a creative capacity. He didn't just learn French. He used that environment to put on a show.
But his time as a French interpreter didn't last long, though. After he completed his language training in 1944, he was assigned to the Pacific Theater, initially as a teleprinter operator.
So back to a technical role again.
Right, and he was on a path to a very dangerous assignment. The source notes he was scheduled to ship out to Iwo Jima.
But the night before his transport, another one of these crucial moments happened. An audition changed his path entirely.
Yes, he attended a production of Hamlet that was put on by the Special Services Entertainment Unit.
And after he auditioned before, Major Maurice Evans, who was a famous Shakespearean actor, and Captain Alan Ludden,
who would later host Password.
That's the one. He was transferred into Special Services. So for the next 2 years, his job was to perform around the Pacific Theater.
In Hawaii, Guam, Saipan, Tinian, and ultimately Iwo Jima entertaining the troops. He was honorably discharged as a corporal in 1946.
So if you look at the whole context here, you see that the Army, through this completely unpredictable sequence of events, pneumonia, language school, and audition, it inadvertently molded him into this multi-hyphenate talent.
A performer, a writer, and a director.
All while exposing him to the necessity of immediate, high-stakes, crowd-pleasing entertainment for the most critical audience you can imagine. Bored and battle-weary soldiers.
The path he was supposed to take was completely bypassed by, well, the pragmatic needs of wartime entertainment and his own creative initiative.
And that military experience truly was the catalyst that launched him into his civilian career. It was a very rapid transition.
Moving out of the military and into the late 1940s, we see him land right in the epicenter of the emerging golden age of television comedy.
His transition from corporal to Broadway performer was swift. After his service, he performed in Broadway musicals like Inside USA and Alive and Kicking.
And Broadway wasn't just the proving ground for performers back then. It was where television executives were scouting for talent that could handle the intensity of live performance.
That search led him to Max Liebman, who in 1950 cast him as a comic actor on Sid Caesar's groundbreaking live program, Your Show of Shows.
Reiner was on air performing in the skits, but at the same time, he was doing what he would do best for decades. Contributing ideas in the back with the writing staff.
That combination of on-screen visibility and off-screen creative input gave him this unparalleled 360-degree perspective on how comedy was conceived, written, performed, and then delivered to a mass audience.
But it's the transition to Caesar's Hour, the show after that, that truly created the gravitational center for comedic talent that would define the next half-century of American humor.
This is the legendary writer's room, a space that has achieved, it's almost mythological status in the history of American entertainment.
Reiner wrote there, but the names he worked alongside. It's an astonishing constellation of genius. Mel Brooks, Neil Simon.
Woody Allen, Larry Gelbart, Mel Tolkien, Mike Stewart, and others. We are talking about the architects of MA's age, the producers, Annie Hall, countless Broadway hits.
All crammed into one pressurized space, writing for a weekly live variety show.
And what's fascinating here is understand the mechanics of that room. It was like a comedy pressure cooker. They were generating material at an insane pace for live weekly television.
Often competing with each other, testing material instantly on the boss, Sid Caesar, and then watching it unfold live.
It was an apprenticeship unlike any other. It demanded collaboration, speed, and just ruthlessness in editing.
And the source material has a critical nugget of insight here about the technical aspect of that collaboration. Reiner, despite being a primary creative engine, did not receive credit for all of his sketch material during this time.
Which was common in that high-volume collaborative environment. The final credit often went to the show's top writers or producers.
It really speaks to the collective nature of that environment. They were writing so fast that individual credit often became secondary to the need to simply fill 90 minutes of airtime every week.
And that environment fostered a professional humility and a collaborative spirit in Reiner. A willingness to let his ideas serve the greater good, even without a byline.
And this focus on the output, not the personal credit, it becomes a defining feature of his later career as a director and a mentor.
Yet, despite the uncredited writing, his visible role as a supporting performer was recognized immediately by the industry.
He won Emmy Awards in 1955 and 1956, specifically as a supporting actor for his on-air appearances on Caesar's Hour.
Think about that timeline. He's receiving the industry's highest honors as a performer before he is fully credited for the writing talent that would later define him.
It reinforces this idea that he was a complete package, a performer who understood the nuance of delivery and a writer who understood the architecture of a joke.
He was rapidly evolving. By 1958, he even briefly stepped into the host role.
Right, taking over the CBS primetime game show Keep Talking. After Monty Hall, he left that show in July 1959.
It just highlights how fluid and versatile his early career was. A performer, a writer, an uncredited creative force, and a host, all before he created his signature lasting body of work in the 1960s.
And that fluidity is so crucial because it leads us directly into the period where he solidified his reputation, not just as a collaborator, but as a foundational creator of American television structure.
The 1960s saw him create an iconic sitcom, while at the same time perfecting his legendary partnership with Mel Brooks.
Okay, so let's discuss the creation of the Dick Van Dyke Show. Reiner's genius was in mining his own life for material, a process that started in 1958. He wrote the initial 13 episodes of a television series he titled Head of the Family.
And he based the show explicitly on his own professional life.
Right, as a TV comedy writer who navigates the chaotic world of a TV writer's room before, returning home to a comparatively calm domestic setting.
Yeah. And his intention was clear. He wrote that autobiographical lead role to star in it himself. The pilot was shot, but this is the major pivot point in television history.
A moment that required immense professional clarity and, ego control.
Absolutely. The pilot failed to sell at first, and when the producer Sheldon Leonard re-examined the project, he famously disliked Reiner in the lead role.
That must have been jarring. I mean, you write a show based on your own life and experiences, and then the key producer tells you that you are fundamentally miscast in your own story. That's got to be a heavy toll.
The sources suggest Reiner's personality, while brilliant and funny, was maybe too sharp or too specialized for the mainstream appeal Leonard was looking for. The genius of Rob Petrie, the character, was his approachability. He was the ordinary man in the extraordinary job. Leonard felt Reiner, maybe because of his background as Alan Brady's on-air foil, projected too much of that demanding TV professional.
So Reiner made the difficult professional decision to accept the critique.
He did. The series was successfully recast with Dick Van Dyke and retitled The Dick Van Dyke Show.
It premiered in 1961 and ran for 5 iconic seasons until 1966. By stepping back from the leading autobiographical role he created, Reiner basically facilitated the massive success of Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore,
transforming them into global household names and creating an enduring piece of Americana that still runs in syndication today.
This action, in my view, is one of the most significant indicators of Reiner's true genius.
How many creators have the professional integrity and the ego control to step out of the autobiographical role they wrote for themselves just because they recognize another actor is better suited for the commercial success of the project?
It's rare. He chose the success of the show over his personal vanity as a leading man.
And he maintained control and influence.
Yeah.
He produced the show, he frequently wrote, and he occasionally appeared on the show himself.
As Rob Petrie's demanding, egocentric, and manipulative boss, the television host Alan Brady,
his appearances as Alan Brady were hilarious, precisely because they offered the audience a glimpse into that dark, demanding, highly pressurized side of TV production that the mild-mannered Rob Petrie always had to navigate.
It was a clever way for Reiner to act out the parts of his own professional life that were, too eccentric for the family-centric lead character.
And while he was producing the defining sitcom of the decade, Reiner simultaneously cemented his legacy in stand-up and sketch history alongside his friend, Mel Brooks.
The creation of the 2,000-year-old man routine is a textbook example of improvisational brilliance guided by structure.
This dynamic duo began the act in 1960 on The Steve Allen Show. Reiner played the essential role of the straight man, the patient, academic interviewer who sets up the absurd and anachronistic histories delivered by the 2,000-year-old character played by Brooks.
The genius of the act, as described by Brooks's biographer, William Holtzman, was that it was an ingenious jazz improvisation.
This wasn't rehearsed dialogue. It relied totally on their mental ability and chemistry.
Reiner's role was to provide the framework, the precise question that would guide Brooks's free-form comic mind into a new dimension of absurdity.
And they turned that simple premise into a phenomenon that transcended television. The sources note this act expanded into 5 comedy albums.
With incredible longevity. The final album, The 2,000-Year-Old Man in the year 2000, won a Grammy Award for Best Spoken Word Comedy Album in 1999.
Decades after the act began.
That longevity just underscores its cultural significance. Gerald Nachman, another one of Brooks's biographers, captured Reiner's role perfectly. He called him the second banana supreme.
And he described Reiner's skill as essential for guiding his partner's churning comic mind. He wasn't just asking questions, he was steering the creative conversation.
That role of the straight man, the anchor that provides the structure and limits against which the wild genius can run free, is one of Reiner's most essential and often underappreciated talents.
It speaks to his selflessness as a creative partner. He prioritized the comedic outcome over his own spotlight. Reiner himself acknowledged this. He noted that he was instrumental in giving Brooks an identity as a comic performer for the first time.
And Reiner's focus on structure and guidance, which he mastered in the writer's room and perfected with Brooks, it inevitably led him to the director's chair. In 1966, he co-starred in the film The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming. But his first time behind the camera as a film director came with the adaptation of his own 1958 semi-autobiographical novel, Enter Laughing,
which was released in 1967. And this move marks the full transition into the directing phase of his career, a phase that dominated the 1970s and 80s.
And that directing phase allowed him to fully apply the lessons he learned from the writer's room.
How to manage explosive talent, how to prioritize the collective vision, and how to balance dark, daring humor with mainstream appeal.
This is where we see a fascinating contrast between his commercial mega hits and work that was critically loved by a small, discerning audience.
Take, for example, the film Where's Papa? From 1970. It's a key source of insight into Reiner's thoughts on Hollywood economics and, really, the meaning of success.
That movie is a true case study in niche adoration versus financial reality. He gave a surprising financial detail about it in his 2003 memoir, My Anecdotal Life.
Right. He classified Where's Papa as a genuine cult classic, but his definition was entirely rooted in the balance sheet.
According to Reiner, it was a cult classic because, despite being critically adored by a small minority who insisted it was one of the greatest, most daring, and innovative moving pictures ever made, it failed utterly to break even financially.
That is a harsh, practical definition of a cult classic.
It is. He said it must fail to earn back the cost of making, marketing, and distributing it. He broke down the numbers. Where's Papa? Was made in 1969 for a little over $1 million.
And the distribution statements he saw showed it needed another $650,000 just to clear its costs.
That level of detail grounds the often romantic idea of a cult classic in the cold reality of entertainment finance. It shows Reiner's perspective.
He valued both the art and the business equally. And he was keen to share the unromantic truth about the film's niche status.
In stark contrast to that, his 1977 film, Oh God,
starring George Burns and John Denver,
was a resounding universal success, both financially and critically. It became the 6th highest-grossing film of 1977.
And critics responded to its gentle, humanist approach. Roger Ebert's review summarized the reception perfectly, calling Oh God a treasure of a movie, a sly, civilized, quietly funny speculation.
It just illustrates Reiner's mastery over tone. He could handle the dark, daring, almost anarchic comedy of Where's Papa and pivot completely to the gentle, universally palatable, high-concept charm of, oh, God.
And throughout this period, Reiner was also briefly back in television. He created the new Dick Van Dyke Show, which ran from 71 to 74.
And he continued to make guest appearances on high-profile variety and anthology shows like Night Gallery and The Carol Burnett Show.
But the late 70s saw him forge one of his most important and career-defining collaborations, his partnership with Steve Martin.
This is a critical point of analysis, isn't it? Reiner had already spent decades working with and structuring the comedic output of a churning comic mind in Mel Brooks.
Right. And now he applied that mastery to the next generation of genius.
Carl Reiner played an absolutely pivotal role in launching the film career of Steve Martin. Arguably, he was the indispensable structural anchor that translated Martin's often chaotic, absurdist stage persona into mainstream cinematic gold that audiences could follow and connect with.
And this sustained partnership, it's built on trust and mutual understanding. Reiner directed 4 of Martin's most successful early films in rapid succession, a clear indication of how well they worked together to synthesize Martin's stage act into film narrative.
This collaboration started with The Jerk in 1979, Martin's very first feature film. Reiner helped structure the episodic nature of Martin's humor into a linear story, making that iconic comedic debut accessible to millions.
And then film established a pattern. Reiner was the stabilizing force, allowing Martin's anarchic spirit to be contained within a recognizable plot.
Following The Jerk, they released Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid in 1982, a unique film that Reiner also co-wrote and appeared in.
And that film showcased their shared love for classic Hollywood, being a pastiche of 1940s noir cinema.
The rapid output continued with The Man with Two Brains in '83, a surreal comedy exploring Martin's split personalities, and finally, All of Me in 1984.
Which many critics consider the peak of their collaboration, utilizing physical comedy and that high-concept body switching.
That sustained period of collaboration, 4 major films in 5 years, it just shows Reiner's unique ability to serve as a guide for these singular talents.
He knew how to harness the unique, often uncontrollable energy of a new comedic voice, something he had perfected decades earlier in the writer's room with Brooks and Simon.
His directing style was less about imposing a rigid vision and more about creating a safe, functional structure that allowed the star's energy to flourish.
He was, yet again, the supreme straight man, this time behind the camera.
As we transition into the later phases of his life, starting in the 1990s and carrying him almost to his century mark, Reiner was anything but retired.
Not at all. This era is characterized by an incredible prolificacy across multiple fields, especially in writing and taking on these memorable character roles in high-profile films.
For many of the younger generation of moviegoers in the early 2000s, he was most recognized immediately as Saul Bloom,
the grizzled, experienced con man in Steven Soderbergh's Ocean's film series.
Ocean's 11 in 2001, 12 in 2004, and 13 in 2007.
And he brought that classic, experienced comedic energy and timing to a modern, high-profile heist franchise, acting as the old-school anchor in a cast of young A-list talent.
He also entered the world of voice work, and this is where we get a really charming anecdote that connects his entire life story right back to his Bronx origins.
He voiced Sarmoti the Lion in the animated series Father of the Bride from 2004 to 2005.
And this anecdote just perfectly encapsulates how Reiner filtered all his life experiences through his comedic lens. He made a specific claim about his performance during a teleconference about the show.
What do you say?
Reiner stated that his roar for Sarmoti was authentic because, as he put it, I spent my youth, from the time I was 6 to 18, living next to the Bronx Zoo. I knew the lions intimately.
That detail is just wonderful, using his childhood geographical location to justify his vocal performance as a cartoon lion.
He also added that he learned they have the worst breath of any animal in the world and that the writing was excellent. He noted that his character Sarmoti was a curmudgeon who always gets the good lines.
He was so keenly aware of the mechanics of humor, even in a cartoon. He also voiced Santa in the animated special Merry Madagascar in 2009.
But perhaps the most enduring and impressive aspect of his late career was his shift into authorship. He leveraged his lifelong collection of memories.
He became remarkably prolific in his 80s and 90s, writing more than 24 books, spanning nonfiction, memoir, and fiction.
This includes a series of humorous memoirs structured around recollection. I Remember Me from 2012, I Just Remembered from 2014, and What I Forgot to Remember in 2015.
This writing demonstrates his profound comfort with self-reflection and the ability to find humor in the simple act of living a long life. It's also a literary extension of his philosophy of finding the ordinary in the special.
Even his children's books had a charming domestic origin.
He started writing them like, tell me a scary story, but not too scary, based on a specific repeated request from one of his grandsons.
Who would ask, tell me a scary story, Grandpa, but not too scary?
That tiny detail just encapsulates his generosity as a creator, turning a simple request from a grandchild into published material. It speaks to his deep creative drive and his innate desire to engage and entertain, regardless of the medium or the audience's age.
And this decades-long, multifaceted career, naturally, it garnered immense recognition across the industry.
Over his entire career, he amassed an impressive total of 11 Primetime Emmy Awards and 1 Grammy Award for the 2000-Year-Old Man albums.
His recognition started early. He received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1960. He was later inducted into the Television Hall of Fame in 1999.
But the true measure of his influence came when the industry honored him with the prestigious Mark Twain Prize for American Humor in 2000.
That ceremony was a veritable reunion of comedic titans, featuring tributes from his longtime colleagues, including Mel Brooks, Dick Van Dyke, and Steve Martin.
That specific gathering is so telling, isn't it?
It is. It highlights that his legacy isn't defined by one single achievement, but by the fact that he was instrumental in either launching or nurturing the careers of 3 different generations of comedic superstars.
His contemporary, Brooks, the television star Van Dyke, and the film superstar Martin.
And one final distinction regarding his family legacy. In 2017, Carl Reiner and his son, Rob Reiner, became the first father-son duo to have their footprints and handprints added to a concrete slab at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood.
A permanent physical symbol of their shared cinematic influence. A truly unique tribute.
Shifting now to his personal life and the philosophical approach that underpinned his entire body of work, we find the grounding elements that made his comedy so incredibly relatable.
Despite the fact that he was clearly an extraordinary talent.
Absolutely. His personal stability was remarkable, especially for the high-pressure world of Hollywood. His family life was tremendously important.
He was married to the singer Estelle Bost for almost 65 years, a marriage that began in 1943 and lasted until her death in 2008.
That is such a rarity in show business. He even noted in a later interview that when they met, people told them their age difference meant it wouldn't work.
But, as he said, it only worked for 65 years, and if she didn't pass on, we'd still be working on it. A great example of his dry wit applied to his own life.
They had 3 children who all went on to successful creative careers. The actor and director Rob Reiner, the author Annie Reiner, and the artist Lucas Reiner.
But there's one iconic detail that links Estelle directly to cinema history and the work of their son.
That detail, of course, is Estelle Reiner delivering the single most famous comedic line of the late 20th century.
I'll have what she's having.
In the deli scene of the 1989 film When Harry Met Sally, which was directed by their son, Rob Reiner.
It's a beautifully concentric piece of family history woven into the very fabric of romantic comedy. The matriarch of the family delivering the ultimate punchline in the film directed by her son, a film that explores the very domestic relationships Reiner chronicled in The Dick Van Dyke Show.
Now let's return to his philosophical outlook because it explains why his work resonated so widely. From the domestic comedy of Rob Petrie to the historical absurdity of The 2000-Year-Old Man.
Reiner articulated his philosophy on comedy writing in a 1981 interview, arguing that a comedy writer must fundamentally imagine yourself as not somebody very special, but somebody very ordinary.
That simplicity is crucial. He believed that if an ordinary person finds something funny, it's going to make everybody laugh.
Conversely, he warned against the danger of thinking of oneself as special or above the audience, which he said leads to becoming a pedant and a bore.
This grounding in universal human experience explains why The Dick Van Dyke Show has endured. The jokes are based on relatable, often mundane domestic conflicts, a misplaced wallet, a misremembered story, the struggle to be an efficient parent.
It's not about high-concept shock, it's about recognition.
He even likened the writing process to walking. If you start thinking too hard about the mechanism, you'll trip. Don't analyze the funny. Just trust your instinct and ground the humor in that shared experience.
This grounded philosophy makes his late-life decision to embrace social media, a platform defined by self-promotion and heightened ego, all the more interesting.
He became a Twitter phenomenon in his 90s. He joined Twitter in July 2012 at the age of 90.
And he explained he was doing it initially just to keep up with his grandson, Jake. And yet, he didn't just maintain a presence, he was genuinely active.
He accumulated an enormous following of 367,000 followers and posted an incredible 6,520 tweets.
Focusing heavily on movies, his memories, and notably current politics. At 98, he was truly the oldest, most active, and most consistently relevant celebrity using that platform. It showed his tireless commitment to staying engaged with the world.
What's also charming is the insight he offered into his ongoing daily routine, which he shared when he appeared on Jerry Seinfeld's series Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee in 2012.
It highlighted the sheer endurance of his most important professional relationship.
He shared that every single night, his great friend Mel Brooks would head over to his house. They would eat dinner together, watch taped Jeopardy, a nightly intellectual contest, and then settle in for a movie.
And the rule for the movie was hilariously, specifically structured. It had to be a B movie, usually a thriller or a war film.
That contained one of two specific overused militaristic lines: secure the perimeter or get some rest.
Those small, almost peculiar details speak volumes about the enduring nature of their lifelong friendship, which extended to his very last moments.
Reiner would often joke about the ritual, mentioning that Brooks, ever the performer, falls asleep with his mouth open every single time during the movie.
As we respectfully discuss his final days, the source material notes, Reiner was a lifelong liberal Democrat who became very publicly outspoken, denouncing the Trump administration in 2018.
He remained engaged and active until the very end. He passed away from natural causes on June 29, 2020, at the age of 98, at his home in Beverly Hills.
His nephew, George Shapiro, provided a beautiful, gentle account of his final hours. Reiner had been in good spirits all day and spent the evening, as was his tradition, watching television with Mel Brooks.
He became unsteady and fell while walking with assistance, lost consciousness, and died shortly thereafter.
A truly poignant detail underscores his commitment to his craft and his family right up until his last breath. His final performance was in home movie, The Princess Bride,
a project organized for charity during the COVID-19 pandemic where various celebrities filmed scenes from the film at home.
And he filmed the final scene, appropriately, alongside his son Rod Reiner, just 3 days before his death.
His final line on camera captured the essence of his family and collaborative spirit. His last words on screen were, "As you wish,"
which, in the context of The Princess Bride, means, "I love you." The family gave their blessing for the scene to be used, providing a fairy tale ending to a spectacular career.
Tributes flooded in from across the entire industry, from his contemporaries like Mel Brooks and Dick Van Dyke to the talents he nurtured like Steve Martin and Jerry Seinfeld.
Cheryl Hines, one of his co-stars from Father of the Bride, perhaps summed up the universal feeling best. She called him not only an amazing comedic gift, but was also an extraordinary human being.
In synthesizing Carl Reiner's vast career, we return to the core elements that ensured his longevity and influence.
The writing brilliance he shared with the titans of comedy in the highly pressurized environment of Caesar's hour.
The professional courage required to step back and create the enduring archetype of the American sitcom writer with The Dick Van Dyke Show.
The groundbreaking improvisational collaboration with Mel Brooks that showcased his structural genius as a straight man.
And his invaluable mentorship of Steve Martin's early film career.
What stands out most profoundly is the sheer duration and versatility of his influence and his unwavering desire to adapt.
He went from entertaining troops in the Pacific during World War II, a corporal performing in front of soldiers, all the way to becoming a highly relevant, deeply engaged social media figure who was tweeting about movies and politics at age 98.
He mastered every medium, always guided by his singular focus on humor and humanity. His life provided a template for creative longevity rooted in a crucial professional humility.
Carl Reiner believed the key to comedy was imagining yourself as someone ordinary, focusing on the universal laughter derived from everyday, recognizable experience.
Given his extraordinary life and all the different projects he launched, here's a provocative thought for you to consider.
Reiner sought to find the funny in the ordinary life of the average American. Which of his many creations, whether it was Rob Patry in The Dick Van Dyke Show, the characters he directed in his films, or the stories he told in his later novels, best exemplifies this philosophy of creating profound humor from the ordinary?
And how does that approach continue to shape contemporary humor today?
Thanks for listening.